She called him dear heart. He called her sweet mistress. But to the crown, those words spelled treason. "I'd die a queen," she whispered before her execution. "But I would rather have died the wife of Culpeper." Her love letters were burned, her name erased from every royal record. But the echoes of her laughter haunted the palace long after her head fell on the block. The throne demands loyalty, history whispers, but love demands freedom. And in that eternal conflict between crown and heart, every royal story bleeds. In royal courts, love wasn't poetry. It was punishment. Behind every grand wedding, there were secret lovers, hidden letters, and betrayals that could end in execution. History remembers the crowns, the portraits, and the glittering balls. But what if it gets to the nights of fear, the trembling hearts behind the silks and jewels? Because for kings and queens, marriage was never about love. It was a weapon, forged in politics, sealed in alliances and sharpened by ambition. But still they fell in love. And when they did, it was like setting fire to the throne itself. Every stolen glance was treason. Every whispered word risked a kingdom. And every affair could start a war or end in the cold edge of an executioner's blade. In the palace, one courtier once wrote, walls had ears and hearts had no place. Tonight, we lift the velvet curtain on the most dangerous emotion ever felt by royal blood. A feeling powerful enough to rewrite laws, destroy dynasties, and topple thrones. Love, the one thing a king could never truly control, and the one sin that could cost him everything. Before she was queen, Catherine was just a young girl in the Tudor court, barely more than a teenager when King Henry VIII noticed her. He was 50, swollen with age, wounded by his past wives, and desperate for youth and affection. She, radiant and naive, had no idea she was stepping into a cage lined with gold IN 1540. The Tudor palace was a theater of whispers. The king's footsteps echoed like thunder, and courtiers bowed so low their heads nearly brushed the marble. When Henry's eyes found Catherine, he called her a rose without thorns. For a brief, golden season, Catherine's reign shimmered with joy. The court danced to the rhythm of feasts and tournaments. Laughter echoed through candlelit halls, and the young queen's beauty became the crown's brightest ornament. With her effortless grace and soft laughter, Catherine embodied the fantasy Henry longed for, the gentle, obedient, adoring wife. Unlike in Bullen before her, Catherine showed no hunger for power, no whisper of reform or intrigue. Her charm was her weapon, her innocence her armor, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed this child queen had achieved the impossible. She had tamed the tempest that was Henry VIII. Yet beneath the gilded surface, the first fractures had already begun to spread. Henry's body was failing him. The ulcer on his leg festered, poisoning not only his flesh but his mind. Pain brought paranoia. The once magnificent king now drifted between rapture and rage. Though he adored Catherine, he was still a man forged in betrayal and haunted by the ghosts of executed wives. And Catherine, radiant, playful, dangerously naive, carried secrets that could destroy her. The whispers of her youth at Lambeth, of stolen moments with Henry Manox and Francis Derham, lingered like smoke that refused to fade. The Duchess of Norfolk's household had hidden the scandal, but memory is a cruel servant. Now Derham himself sought entry to the Queen's household, daring to stand once more in the shadow of his former lover. It was a perilous game, for in a court where a queen's virtue was her crown, even a rumor could become a death sentence. Even more perilous than Catherine's secrets was the air she breathed within the court itself. Beneath the glitter of jewels and ceremony, old rivalries smoldered and jealousies festered like rot beneath polished marble. To some, the young queen's ascent was a ladder to power, a chance to bask in the warmth of royal favor. To others, it was an insult carved in gold, a Howard triumph that demanded ruin. The same bloodline that had given Henry his doom in Bullen now placed another daughter of that house upon the throne. And history, it seemed, was eager to repeat itself. Among the courtiers who moved like shadows around the king stood Thomas Culpeper, handsome, reckless, and dangerously near the queen. A gentleman of the privy chamber, he enjoyed the king's trust and the queen's attention. In whispered corridors and stolen moments, their paths began to cross. What started as fascination would soon be remembered as betrayal, and those quiet meetings would become the seeds of treason. To the court, It was romance. To history, it was the beginning of a tragedy. She was his escape from decay, wrote one ambassador, but he was her death sentence. In the autumn of 1541, as Henry and Catherine set forth on their grand northern progress, a glittering parade meant to reaffirm the king's power. The tide quietly began to turn against them. Beneath the banners and cheers, old enemies of the Howard family stirred from the shadows. Whispers, once buried, clawed their way back to surface. Among those who listened was John Lascelles, a seemingly insignificant court official, yet one whose loyalties lay far from the Howards. His sister, Mary Hall, who had once served in the Dowager Duchess's household, carried tales of Catherine's reckless youth, tales that, in the wrong hands, could ignite catastrophe. Sensing the danger, Lascelles turned to Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, the king's devout servant and a man who understood all too well how swiftly rumor became execution. And so, beneath the pageantry of the royal progress, a quiet conspiracy began to breathe. On All Saints' Day, November 1st, 1541, as the solemn chants of Mass filled the chapel at Hampton Court, Archbishop Cranmer slipped a letter into the king's hands, a letter that would splinter the fragile peace of Henry's world. Within its pages lay accusations that Queen Catherine had been impure before their marriage, that the spotless jewel he had so proudly displayed was tarnished by scandal. For a moment, the king's composure faltered. The word struck like a blade through his pride and longing. Henry, who had adored her innocence as proof that his own sins might yet be forgiven, could not bear the thought of deceit. He withdrew to his private chambers, stunned, broken. And for the first time in years, the mighty King of England wept. An investigation was ordered with ruthless efficiency. Catherine was confined within Hampton Court. Cut off from her attendants, her laughter, her crown, a queen now reduced to a prisoner in her own palace. Panic gave way to disbelief. At first, she denied everything, pleading innocence with the desperate grace of a child caught in a storm. But as arrests multiplied and interrogations began, some under the whip and rack, the truth of her past refused to stay buried. Francis Derham, dragged once more into her shadow, confessed that he and Catherine had been lovers at Lambeth. He insisted they had spoken of marriage, a claim that, under Tudor law, cast a chilling shadow over her union with Henry, for if true, the king's marriage to her was no marriage at all. Yet even that was not the deadliest revelation. Word soon reached the council that, during the royal progress, the Queen had held secret meetings with Thomas Culpeper, a handsome gentleman of the king's privy chamber. Meetings arranged in secret by Lady Rochford, the widow of George Bullen. What passed between Catherine and Culpeper remains uncertain, but in a court ruled by fear and suspicion, secrecy itself was sin enough. In the eyes of the king and his council, a queen who merely imagined betrayal had already committed treason. Under relentless interrogation, Thomas Culpeper confessed that he had intended to have a secret, intimate relationship with the queen, a phrase cloaked in ambiguity, yet damning enough to seal their fates. Henry's sorrow curdled into fury. The woman he had called his rose without a thorn was, in his eyes, now the vilest traitor. No mercy would be shown. In early November 1541, Catherine was removed from Hampton Court and taken to Sion Abbey, a former nunnery turned prison for fallen queens. She would never again see freedom. As winter settled over England, her fate, and that of those who had loved or served her, trembled on the edge of destruction. The machinery of Tudor justice, once awakened, was merciless and unstoppable. For Catherine-Howard, once the glittering jewel of Henry's court, the petals were already falling and the axe was waiting. The Privy Council moved swiftly. By December 1541, formal charges of treason were drawn up against the Queen. Letters, confessions, and tortured testimonies left little room for doubt. Even without proof of adultery, the mere intention, the secret meetings, the whispered words, was treason enough under Tudor law. Judgment fell quickly. Thomas Culpeper and Francis Derham were condemned for high treason. Their ends were brutal and symbolic. Derham suffered the full horror reserved for traitors, hanged, drawn, and quartered at Tyburn on December 10th, 1541. Culpeper, spared the worst by former favor, was beheaded. Their deaths were not merely punishment. They were warning. The crown would suffer no betrayal, imagined or real, from those who dared to reach too close to power. As the new year dawned, Catherine's own end crept near, stripped of every royal privilege. She was brought back to London under heavy guard, no longer a queen, but a prisoner marked for death. On January 21st, 1542, an act of attainder was passed in Parliament, condemning her for treason without the need for a trial. By the standards of Tudor justice, it was swift. By any measure of mercy, it was cruel. Catherine once Queen of England, was now a condemned traitor awaiting her fate. According to tradition, the night before her execution, she requested that a block be brought to her cell, so she might practice placing her head upon it. Whether truth or legend, the image remains haunting. A girl barely 20 years old, rehearsing her own death. On the cold morning of February 13th, 1542, Catherine Howard was led to Tower Green. Unlike common prisoners, she was granted the grim dignity of a private execution within the Tower walls. Witnesses wrote that she approached the scaffold with composure and grace. In a clear, unwavering voice, she confessed her sins, prayed for the king's forgiveness, and laid her head upon the block she had so fearfully rehearsed upon. With a single stroke, the queen's brief, shining life was ended. Beside her, Lady Rochford, who had helped arrange Catherine's secret meetings with Thomas Culpeper, met the same fate that morning. And so ended the story of Catherine Howard, a girl plucked from obscurity, raised to a throne, and destroyed by the unforgiving demands of Tudor honor. In the ruthless theater of Henry VIII's court, she was not the first to fall, and she would not be the last. Catherine's tragedy endures as one of the most poignant chapters in the saga of Henry's reign. She was no schemer, no master of intrigue. She was a child thrust into a world of predators, politics, and peril. Her downfall was born not of malice, but of innocence, misjudgment, and the cruel double standards imposed upon women at court. In the end, Catherine Howard paid the ultimate price of mistakes of youth in a world that demanded perfection from its queens, but seldom from its kings. Her brief reign reminds us that in Tudor England, crowns were often woven with thorns, and beneath the glitter of power lay the constant shadow of ruin. She remains, even now, the queen who burned too brightly and fell too soon, a fleeting rose in a garden ruled by iron and blood. Thank you for joining us in exploring the life and tragic fall of Catherine Howard. If you found this journey through history compelling, please like the video, subscribe for more stories from the past, and share your thoughts below. We'd love to know which part of Catherine's story moved you most.